Start stream.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Shadow.
Okay, the stream is live.
It is.
Okay. Oh, intro time. Okay.
Welcome. So we're doing the intro now?
Wait, is there a link to the live stream? What? Oh.
Here, I'll send it. Bam, there's the link. Okay, yeah, just...
Hey guys, so thank you for joining the World History AP midterm stream, and we will get it underway right now. Now, if you check inside of the chat for this live stream, we have a link to a Kahoot challenge that y'all guys are supposed to do. So basically the whole concept is we're supposed to y'all guys do the challenge independently, so it's like a Quizlet, and then we have this stream to go along with it, so it's like question to question, you know, so we can do it with you guys and we can explain it and really go into depth about, you know, the reasons why this happens and the reason for why this happens, you know what I'm saying? So that's the whole point for why it's like this, so why we have two Kahoots. Now we're about to get started, so y'all guys should start too, so let's start in 3, 2, 1.
Alright, so just read the
Okay.
questions, each one different.
Which of the following religions were monotheistic and had a sacred text? Now, we know Christianity, Islam, and Hindu, and Buddhism are all very important parts of culture in many different areas and empires, and they help control and hold religion together. Now, what do y'all guys think are the answers? Pick them.
There are two answers for this one, so it may look confusing, but...
It is Christianity and Islam. Now, for these streams, you have to remember, some of these have two answers, some of them don't, so follow your gut. Now, for Christianity, a good example for Christianity is that you can look at things such as the Roman Empire and things like that. They used Christianity as like a way to follow like the way they would live and things like that, and it really influenced their way of life, but not as much as Islam did. Islam was a very important part of things such as the Ottoman Empire and things like that, and a good example of this is Sharia law, which is Islamic law, and a good example is right after the Byzantine capital of Constantinople was taken over by the Ottomans, by Solomon II. After that, they first had Byzantinian law or Justinian law, but it got switched over to Sharia law, which is Islamic law. And even nowadays, Sharia law is still quite prevalent in places such as Iraq and Iran, which shows how much of an impact that Islam had. So let's move on to the next question.
Yeah, and basically for diagnostic of this question, you can eliminate Hinduism and Buddhism because they are actually polytheistic and not monotheistic, and that just leaves Christianity and Islam, and they both have their separate sacred texts, with Christianity having the Bible and Islam having the Quran.
Islamic scholars learned and gathered information from which cultures?
So, for this question, basically, the one thing you want to know is all these religions leached off of ancient Greece and their intellectual studies, and that's how they've made technological advancement.
Exactly. And also, you have to understand that although at the moment it is Greece, India, and China, it changes over time as this is before the Roman Empire is created and stuff. So that's why, well, the Roman Empire has been created, but they're learning off of Greek technology and history that they've gathered over the years before the collapse of the Greek Empire. And from this, it also affects India and China, which, because it's affecting them as well, China and India are able to create their own technological advancements and advancements in things like not just technological advancements, but also advancements in philosophy, ways of thinking, new ways of math, English, and science, literature, the spread of culture, basically. And it really influenced all these nations because they're all connected on what's known as the Silk Road, and I'm sure y'all guys have covered that. But basically, that Silk Road was kind of like a highway for where different nations, countries, and cultures could exchange and gather information from each other. And India and China were especially important in this Silk Road. And actually, the Middle East, or Islamic scholars, where most of them were located in places such as Iran, modern-day Iran, and Istanbul, and in places such as the House of Learning in Baghdad. A lot of these were major Silk Road destinations, and a lot of people from China and India and things like that would come through carrying not just their own technological advancements, but also the technological advancements, history, and other things that they've learned from Greece as well. Because as I said earlier, China and India also picked up a lot of stuff from learning from Greece stuff. Well, Greek technology and Greek information, basically, over the years. It was sort of a revival in a way, if you could think about it. They kind of went back to learn so they can go forward. So let's move on to the next question.
Tofu said it best.
Which of the following is not part of the Indian caste system? Now this one's pretty straightforward. It is Buddha. Now, the reason because of this is because Buddha doesn't exist. It's not a caste. So
yeah,
that's why it's
in case y'all want to know what the 5 castes are, it goes from Brahmins to the Kshatriyas to Vaishyas, Sudras, and those are the 4 main categories. And this originates from the Brahma, which is another caste of Brahmins.
Exactly.
And as you said, Buddha is actually the god of Buddhism.
Yeah, Buddha, and also it's not spelled that way. But yes, he is correct. Buddha it's not a caste, it doesn't exist as a caste, but Buddha is, of course, the deity that is worshipped in Buddhism. And on the same note as Buddhism, there are 2 types of Buddhism, Mahayana, Tibetan, and there's another one, I forgot what the other one's called. But they're all Buddhism, but one is more spiritual, one focuses more on singing and stuff, and the other one is more attached to Buddha. So the original Buddhism, it's really not meant to worship Buddha, but it's meant to follow his ways of life and how he lives. And basically that is one is Theravada. There you go. Thank you. It's Theravada, and basically they each are supposed to follow their own, it's like their own version of Buddhism. One is more attached to Buddha, like Buddha himself. They worship him as a God, but other ones are just more attached to the style of living. So you know how Buddha was very selfless and things like that. It's more of that type of peaceful kind of vibe instead of worshiping him. Because back in like Tibet and stuff and like India, you could really look at the culture like in Southeast Asia, India, Tibet. They're all Buddhist, but they have like their own different way of perceiving it. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like how Christianity. It's all Christianity, but they have Catholics, Protestants, Mormons. It's all split up. They're all Christianity, but they worship it their own way. Same as Buddhism. They worship it their own way. It's interpreted their own way. Now let's move on to the next question. The period of warring states refers to the... The chaotic last centuries of the Zhou dynasty.
Yes. And for this, you usually in AP World, you won't ever really talk about the Dia dynasty in ancient choice D. And also, early war between China and India wasn't really happening early on because they weren't like separate entities.
Exactly. It is happening on today. There is a border conflict between China and India. Continue.
Yo, Tofu.
Yes.
Apparently you need to move your screen window to show the full Kahoot because it's showing a little bit of the spreadsheet as well. Yeah. Here, I'll show the screenshot. Here, look at the screenshot. It's like that. Just go off to the next question, I guess.
Now let's discuss a little bit more into the Zhou dynasty and basically what was happening during that timeline. Now, during the Zhou dynasty, or during that later stage in China's history, basically what was happening was it was a lot of warring states, and they're falling apart. And basically, if you look at Chinese history, if you really want like a quick, fast way to sum it up, it's just people backstabbing other people. If you really want to get into like the real history of it, it's just really about how emperors, and not just emperors but generals, are backstabbing other generals to gain power. And it's really about it's really a big power struggle. That's what Chinese history is. It always has been. If you look at the continuities in between, from era to era, dynasty to dynasty, it's always about how people are trying to vie for power, basically.
Yeah, and off of what he said, the Zhou dynasty actually is known as the longest ruling dynasty in China, as it rules from 1045 BC to 256 BC. And this, you will need to know Zhou dynasty a lot in Unit 1 because it is, according to AP World, it is the main dynasty. The dynasty you need to know the best in AP World. Now we're on to question 5, which is a Mesopotamian steppe pyramid was known as a Okay, so now a background of this question is a Coptic has like nothing to do with Mesopotamia. It's actually an indigenous ethnic group in North Africa, and also the Lulu is actually a title that is earned from Mesopotamia, and Iridu it's not really anything important. It's basically just an archaeological site, which just crosses off all of those answer choices, leaving the answer to be a ziggurat, which is indeed a step pyramid.
To add on to that note, ziggurats vary in size. Some are quite small, but some are very large. If you Google them up, you can see. And they're quite important to the Mesopotamian people. One reason for the collapse of the Zhou dynasty is
Okay, so for this question, it actually follows a major trend you see in AP World, where most dynasties collapse because they don't have a fit emperor to rule over the land. And this is just a main theme you'll find for all the different units and time periods in AP World.
he's right. It's normally about the emperor, but not just always the emperor, but the emperor has not just as he's not adequate to rule, but that or the emperor is not worrying about how to regulate the economy. He's not focused on the economy. And this is very important here, as the production of iron was a very important industry at that time for China, and frankly it was a major export. Chinese steel and iron. Steel, iron, porcelain, and silk was quite sought after, and it was a very major export. And the emperor's inability to be able to not control the production of iron is something that's very detrimental to China as an empire during that time. And another good example of this is like how certain empires or emperors, like Tamerlane, for example, as you would later learn in the later units, such as Unit 3 and Unit 4. Same thing happened with Tamerlane. Well, similarly. Well, the reason why Tamerlane's empire collapsed was because they're so focused on conquering, but not focusing on how to make their empire last. They're just focusing on conquering. Kind of like how the Mongols were. But the Mongols had logistics. They really thought things through. Not just were they expanding, but they're really focusing on like how, okay, like, so like, if I do this, I can regulate this place. This area is really, really good for growing cotton. So we're going to be selling this cotton and taxing it. We're going to be taxing trade that's coming through our areas. But things like, people like Tamerlane, they're only focused on conquering. And this is really similar to this because it's related to the economy. Empires don't last if they cannot maintain a good economy. They will crumble. Through interior corruption, revolts, everything, you name it. It all comes down to the ruler, what the ruler prioritizes. And this is a good case of that. The ruler wasn't, you could tell from this that he wasn't able to control the production of iron, which means that the ruler wasn't really focusing on economics, but rather he was focusing on doing other stuff, which is very detrimental to empires as a whole.
Yeah, he's right. And now we're off to the next question. So the AP test that you can roll consists of 55 multiple choice questions. three short answers, a DBQ, and an essay. A DBQ is something that most people who are taking AP World right now don't really know about. So this is basically a question to help you get the grasp of like how a DBQ works, and you will be sent. Okay. And the breakdown of these points goes that it's 4 major categories. You will have to get 1 point for your thesis, 1 point for your contextualization, 3 points for your evidence, and 2 points for your analysis and your reasoning. And if you want a better breakdown about this, you can just search up the AP World DBQ rubric, and there will be rubrics there as the form of PDF to give you more information about scoring criteria for each category.
And also, we're going to have a quote-unquote practice DBQ coming up. If you guys would please go to our Unit 3 notes and have it open. So take it out now, and once we get to that question, you guys will be ready. It's a simulated DBQ. You don't need to write anything, but we want you guys to really think about the question that's given to you. So really think about it. We're only providing 1 document. It's really simple, but it's something to help you guys get a better grasp of how DBQs are, and in a way, you know what I mean? If you guys haven't started a DBQ.
Yeah, and per the 2020 AP test, there are 5 documents, and you're supposed to read those documents and incorporate 3 of these at least as part of your evidence to help make your document more persuasive, give you more points in the evidence/reasoning section.
Exactly. So let's move on to the next one. Which of the following are results of the Trans-Saharan trade? Now, the 2 direct results of the Trans-Saharan trade are the growth of trading cities in Africa such as Timbuktu, and the cultural, technological, and biological diffusion due to trading. Now, this is not only limited to 2, there's actually a multitude of different answers and different solution, things like that.
Yeah, what he said. But basically, those are like the 2 main things that are incorporated from the Trans-Saharan.
Another major thing that we couldn't include, but you should probably know, is that the Trans-Saharan trade. So let's look at Africa as a whole, right? So this is Trans-Saharan. Now, this is, you know where the Sahara is. It's in the middle to northernmost part of Africa. And the Northern African trade, we know that Northern Africa, places like Egypt, Morocco, things like that, they traded with Saudi Arabian or Middle Eastern traders at the time. Not Saudi Arabian, but Middle Eastern traders at the time. And they also landed on the coast of the Middle East. I mean, not the Middle East, Africa. And this trade also facilitated the exchange of cultures and biological diffusion, as we said earlier. But you should probably also know that it also diffused Islam to Africa. It introduced it. And they really helped spread Islam. And a good example of this is Mansa Musa of Timbuktu, the ruler of Timbuktu. Well, the most famous ruler is Mansa Musa. First of all, his pilgrimage to Mecca. It was extremely lavish, and it was pretty crazy. He really, as he went along to Mecca, he basically spread Islam as he was going. And also, Mansa Musa also created a lot of mosques and Islamic universities and things like that. And he really tried to spread Islam to all the places that he could have in touch with, basically. So, yeah.
One big thing about Mansa Musa was the man was rich. Every time he went to like another region or another territory, he would give them gold so much that it would cause inflation at those specific territories. And that's a major key point, because like he was so rich that he was able to get the influence of Islam everywhere.
Exactly, and he was rich because most of the gold at that time was coming through Timbuktu. Timbuktu was a gold town, basically. A lot of gold was going through it, and they were taxing it and things like that, so they were making a lot of money. And actually, you know, Timbuktu technically is the world's richest person in history, actually. They actually did study about it, and they said, like, if you compare him to, like, everybody else who was rich, he's actually really rich. His net worth is, like, I don't know, like, billions. But yeah, it's actually pretty cool. Now let's move on to the next question. The primary goal of Zheng He's expedition was to...
Okay, so for A, we're given establish Chinese trade on the Indian Ocean. B, eliminate foreign trade with China. C, offer military protection or support for Chinese insurgents in the Indian Ocean. Or D, establish Chinese power in the open trade.
Now, this was the primary goal of Zheng He's expedition, and along Zheng He's expedition, I believe he had multiple expeditions. He went out multiple times, and during each time, he would bring back a lot of things back to the emperor and things like that to show his success and things like that. But later on, Zheng He would actually be banned from going on expeditions anymore because they thought that, you know how China was kind of like a hermit kingdom at that time, and they really didn't want influence from the outside world. He had 7 voyages. Thank you. But he didn't want influences from the outside world. Well, not him, but rather the bureaucrats and the aristocrats thought his influence that he brought was affecting the people in China, so they basically didn't let him go on any voyages after his 7th voyage.
So your answer choices are A, classical Greco-Roman tradition, art, literature, and architecture. B, a revival of classical learning. C, naturalistic and humanistic art/writing. D, a repudiation of Christian values.
Okay, so the European Renaissance was basically a time of when people began to challenge the ideas of the church, Christian ideas specifically. And out of all of these choices, the 4th one, a repudiation of Christian values, actually instead of teaching Christian values, it taught humanism was one of them, and naturalism, which both challenged the ideas of Christianity. Renaissance was a time where people focused on using logic to prove why stuff was happening rather than using the Bible and Christianity.
Which of the following are the reasons the Aztecs offered human sacrifices?
A, to terrorize conquered people into submission. B, to give the sun deity energy to fight against the approach of darkness. C, provide nourishment to the moon and stars. D, mark off the days of the ritual calendar. Okay, background of this question is usually the Aztecs they would not terrorize their people, so you would automatically get rid of the first answer choice. Second answer choice, the Aztecs weren't so much into astrology as they were for like their deities and how they like did survival for the deities. And for D, that is a good component of it, but that's not the main thing. So that leaves B to be the answer, which is to give the sun deity energy to fight against approaching darkness, which the Aztecs, they gave their sun deity they believed in their sun deity.
And to add on to this, the Aztecs often did not terrorize their people. Well, their people they did not, but the people that they conquered, yes, they did. Now, all these human sacrifices were either from war prisoners or tribute, and most of the time they would sacrifice it for as like my esteemed associate said earlier, to give the sun deity energy to fight against the encroaching darkness. And they believed that if they didn't sacrifice people, that the sun would never rise again and it would have eternal darkness. So that's why they did it. And they would often do it on top of really high pyramids, and it was quite gory. After they do it, they kick the person's body down the stairs. And apparently that was also to help please the sun deity. And I have to agree, I have to agree to disagree that the Aztecs actually prioritized their calendars quite like a lot. Their calendars were extremely accurate, and their astronomical research and studies were actually quite like they're pretty crazy actually for like the time, and they're actually relatively accurate. I mean, like I think they're only like a month or two off, which is like for like back then that's like really good if you compare it to like other civilizations at that time. And yes, their astronomy was very good, but they never used things such as offering human sacrifices to mark days off their ritual calendar. But yes, their ritual calendar, or their calendar in general, was very important to them, and it was quite sophisticated for the time as well. The civil service exams were designed to
be a mandatory test for all citizens under knowledge of Confucian ideals. B, test everyone's loyalty to China. C, choose officials based on merit instead of their social class. And D, decide to become Chinese. Okay, so for a breakdown of this question is, the main idea of the civil service exam was to see who was the best fit for an official job in the government. And that is the answer choice which we got, which is choose officials based on merit instead of their social.
Not just that, but the Emperor of the Song Dynasty who implemented this, the reason why he implemented this was because he wanted it a way to where they implemented it as a way to where they can not just only give people a way to have upward mobility, but also as a way to not just have upward mobility, but also as a way to give everybody an equal chance on getting a good job in the bureaucracy. And this was, as it's stated right here, it's for everybody. It wasn't a mandatory test. It was your choice, but at the end of the day, most people took it as a way to help themselves advance up the social ladder.
To clarify, I believe only men were able to take the test, but it still was more fair since it wasn't just focused on people of a higher social ranking. It was an exam that the Ming Dynasty used, and it was based on Confucian ideals. And those who, of course, showed better knowledge in their ideals were selected.
Which represents the social hierarchy for the Incan Empire?
A. Nobles, province rulers, commoners. B. Kings and nobles, province rulers, commoners. C. Province rulers, nobles, commoners. And D. Kings, commoners, province rulers. Okay. As of this question, the Inca Empire always has a king, so that rules out A and C. So you only have B and D left, right? But you also need to know that the Inca Empire also had nobles, like people with the king. So that eliminates D and makes B the only answer.
When it came to religion, the Mongols.
A. Welcomed and supported many religious traditions. B. Forced those they conquered to follow their religious practice. C. Only supported religions they liked. And D. Believed in Mongolian. Okay, so when it comes to the Mongols, you need to know when you conquer them, when they conquered other territories, they were actually very religiously tolerant, which is why the answer was A, because they welcomed, supported many religious traditions. As a D, there is no such thing called Mongolian. I can't even pronounce it, but there's no such thing called that. And for C, we just went over that they are. Yeah, and for C, we just went over that they are religiously tolerant, so they didn't only support religion they liked. And B, we said that they were religiously tolerant, so they did not force people to follow their practice.
The Mongols didn't. They also didn't have an official religion, so. Which of the following were not selected from the Ottoman Devshirme system?
A. Janissaries, B. Scribes, C. Tax collectors, or D. Slaves. Okay, so for this question, the Devshirme was the Ottomans' way to recruit soldiers for them. And usually no territories asked slaves to be their soldiers because they just felt like they weren't fit enough to be soldiers. So the answer would be D, slaves.
Not just that, but in Islam they weren't allowed to enslave people of the book. So that also affected it, because some of the people that they enslaved conquered did have religions, such as Judaism or Christianity, and they were not allowed to enslave them. Now, they did use a lot of Christian boys, as they said, that's they're primarily people they took Christian boys from the Balkans, and a majority of them became things such as scribes, government officials, tax collectors, and the very best were selected to be janissaries, which are like modern day special forces. They were like the best of the best of the military, and they were normally taken from the lower class of the people that they conquered. And this was because to guarantee their loyalty, and they were trained. All of these people from the Devshirme system were trained to be extremely loyal to the Sultan and only to the Sultan. And also, all the Christian boys that were taken using the Devshirme system, they're seen as tribute. As not only were the regions that the Ottomans conquered were they supposed to give, like, your standard tribute, such as like grain, food, vegetables, things like that, and also materials such as wood and things like that. But they're also part of their tribute was their population, the Christian boys. Which dynasty overthrew the Yuan dynasty that was put in place by Kublai Khan?
A. Ming, B. King, C. Song, and D. Yang.
Alright, so the dynasty that overthrew the Yuan dynasty was the Ming dynasty. And basically, right after they overtook the Yuan dynasty, which was established by Kublai Khan, basically they tried their best to preserve Chinese culture, and they also did a lot of things such as like persecution and things like that of certain groups in China at that time. And the Mings brought back the civil service exam and things like that. And they also, basically, they tried to bring it back to how it was before the Yuan dynasty.
And as we approach our next question, due to time constraints, we are only going to be able to go through the first 20 questions in our review. So if you want to see the rest of the questions, just go to Kahoot, and we've created a challenge where you can do a self-paced diagnostic for yourself.
Who are England's gentry officials?
A. The Justices of the Peace. B. The King's Commission. C. England's gentry officials. Or D. The Tudors.
Now, basically, England's gentry officials were the Justices of the Peace. Now, the King's Commission does not exist, and C, that answer is just the title of the question. And the Tudors were a ruling class that ruled over England for a good amount of time. And basically, the Justices of Peace were kind of like enforcers. They enforced the will of the king, and they grew increasingly powerful, and more of them over time became part of the English Parliament. So they had a lot of say in the government. And basically their job was to interpret the king's sayings or the king's law and enforce it. So they were things such as enforcers, tax collectors, and basically they kept the peace. That's why they're called Justices of the Peace. Which rights was not given to citizens in the English Bill of Rights?
So, A. Legal due process. B. Protections from tyranny from the monarch. C. Protection from religious persecution. And D. The right to vote for men who own property. So for this question, just note that there are 2 correct answers. So if you're between 2 answers, just pick one of them because they are most likely correct.
Now, the protection from religious persecution was not given in the English Bill of Rights. And a good example of this is during this time, in I believe like 30 or 40 years later after the English Bill of Rights was enacted, people went on, they actually like left England to like go find places to where they can be free from religious persecution. And another thing about this is that when Britain annexed Ireland the Irish who were like a different type of Christian, or Christianity. They believed in a different type of Christianity, as England was Protestant and the Irish were Catholic, and they were criticized and they were persecuted because they were Catholic. And that's a prime example right there. And that's like, I believe that's 100 years later, actually, or 200 years later after this took place. So that's just an example of how that the English Bill of Rights didn't protect people from religious persecution. And the right to vote for men who own property. Now, this was not given to normal men. They were not given the right to vote, although they own property. In the Magna Carta, it stated that aristocrats, or high-ranking officials like bureaucrats and stuff, they were allowed to vote if they owned property, or they were allowed to vote regardless. But normal men, no, they were not allowed to vote. What did Ivan IV and King Louis XIV have in common?
A, they both wanted to keep an eye on the noble class. B, they both wanted to expand their empire. C, they both wanted to standardize Roman Catholicism. Or D, they both wanted to endorse Lutheranism.
They both wanted to keep an eye on their noble class. And a good example of this is how King Louis XIV created the Palace at Versailles to keep all of his nobles in, and they housed a lot of parties there. And the whole point of that was to keep watch of all the nobles. And since they all lived there, they couldn't leave, so, well, without permission. So basically, King Louis XIV had them all locked together, so like they couldn't plot against him, because that's what he worried about the most, that the nobles plotting against him. And Ivan IV, he in Russia they had the boyar class, and he moved most of the boyar class to Moscow to live in this area to basically keep an eye on them, because he was afraid of them revolting. And it's probably because of what happened in Novgorod. Novgorod, they had a little altercation with the boyars, which resulted in violence. So after that, Ivan IV mistrusted a lot of his nobles. So that's also why attributed to him having something in common with King Louis XIV, as they both wanted to keep an eye on their nobles because they were afraid that they were going to plot against them, or that they were getting too powerful. Brainstorm ideas on how the Middle Eastern gunpowder empires differ and relate economically, socially, and politically. Now this one's sort of a DBQ in a way. But as it's a DBQ, like I said earlier, y'all guys were supposed to open up the notes for Unit 3, pages 1 through 4. And basically how they were really similar is that they both all believed in Islam, which held their empires together. It was kind of like the base of their empire. And a way that they differed religiously is that the Safavids were Shia, and the Ottomans were Sunni, and that caused a lot of problems, such as conflicts and wars and things like that, and also trade wars, because of their different religions. And this is also even exemplified today in Iran and Iraq. One is Sunni, one is Shia, and they dislike each other because of it. And economically, they were all major parts of the Silk Road. The Mughals, the Ottomans, and the Safavids, they're all very important parts of the Silk Road. The Ottomans especially, Istanbul was kind of like a really major trading hub after, or not after, but during the Silk Road time. And a lot of traders would go to Istanbul to not just trade, but also to vend and sell items, restock and refresh on their trips. And socially, they're very similar because, as I said earlier, Islam was very important among all these countries, or not countries, empires, and this caused a lot of them to have very similar ways of thinking and really similar ways of how they governed each other or how they governed themselves, as they were all tied around or surrounded, not tied around, but they're all revolving around Islam and Sharia law and things like that. And a good example of this is women's rights, or how women were treated in those nations or empires because of Islam. Just Islamic religion, or not religion, but the culture. Most women were confined to their homes and things like that, and they weren't allowed to learn in the face of other men that they didn't know who weren't family. That's just one example. And politically, they're all quite similar. They all had one big ruler, or one like king, queen, or sultan in this case, sultan, shah, or just ruler like Akbar. But beside that, they are quite similar, but yet again, they're quite different because a lot of times they would often go to war with each other. I believe the Safavids went to war with the Ottomans and the Mughals, and same way. Other words, same way around. I also believe that the Ottomans went to war with the Mughals as well. The Mughals were kind of like a mix. They weren't as like, how do I say it? They're more relaxed on it, as Mughal territory also had a lot of Hindus in it and Sikhs. And as we said earlier, Akbar, one of the major rulers of the Mughal Empire, he was quite tolerant of all religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, all of the above, and he actually supported Sikhism as well, which was a kind of like a mix between Islam and Hinduism.
Yeah. So that'll be it for our live stream today. We went over Unit 1, 2, and 3, and due to time constraints, weren't able to go over Unit 4. So if you want to go over Unit 4 self-paced, just check out our Kahoot. It's at the very top. It'll just do a challenge. We have incorporated challenge. Make sure to check out our notes, our podcasts, and all our other subject live streams, and we'll see you guys later. Thanks for tuning in.